From Ed Smith Stadium in Sarasota, Florida, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Andy Kostka back and better than ever. Andy, it has been quite a while since you've been on the show, and boy, is it glad to have you back. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that makes one of us. No, I'm joking. It's always amazing to sit next to Paul. Phenomenal.
That's not the highlight of being on the podcast. Podcast is you get to talk Orioles baseball. We're here in beautiful Sarasota.
It is a beautiful day today. It's a little too hot. I missed the snow. Believe it or not.
Why?
I wish. Because you can do fun things in the snow.
I will bet that most people watching this or listening to this after the fact on any of their favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, SoundCloud, all those good places, are wishing that they could switch places with us right now. Because it is 81 degrees right now in Sarasota.
Yeah, it's actually pretty nice.
We're coming at it today with a little bit of a tan.
A little bit, or sunburn.
When I left yesterday morning from Baltimore, it was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And let me tell you, once you get to that day 2 snow, day 1 snow is bad, or day 1 snow is great. Day 1 snow is great. It's beautiful. It's lovely. Day 2 snow, that's when you start to get the tire tracks, the really muddy, gross kind of snow.
As a skier, there's nothing better than fresh pow in the morning. fresh pow. We're trying to hit. But no, it's... Yeah, all winter was basically skiing and being with family. So I'm good.
Nice.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't pay attention to this for my life. So why don't we talk about baseball?
Let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about what we learned from the Orioles on our first day of media access after pitchers and catchers have reported to spring training here. And Andy, we heard from Mike Elias today. We heard from Brandon Hyde today. We had an open clubhouse as well before and after practice. And we got to see them out on the field. Plenty of injury updates. At this time last year, we were doing a podcast about the myriad injuries that were besetting the Orioles roster. At that point, we were talking about Kyle Bradish, whether he was going to have a platelet-rich injection at some point. We were talking about John Means. We were talking about all these terrible things. Today was a little bit better than it was last year because the injury updates were a little bit more positive.
Yeah, Mike Elias did not need a notebook to recall every injury like he did last year. That was maybe the warning sign last year when he showed up with a full piece of paper. This year, off the top of his head, was some good news right off the top. We'll start with the good news. Félix Bautista, 2023 All-Star closer, is expected to be ready for opening day, which has been the hope all along. The reason he didn't come back at the end of 2024 was that they hoped that he would be ready. We saw him doing some PFPs today.
I would say less expected, more. He said there was a very good chance.
Very good chance.
Yeah.
Very
he said he wasn't going to rush anything.
Wasn't going to rush anything.
But could be.
Could be.
Yeah.
Very early in the season at the very least.
Yeah. And it sounds like he's not going to be a full participant of spring training right from the get-go. He said we will see Félix Bautista in some Grapefruit League games.
Correct.
But whether he is on this opening day roster or not, it's 6 weeks out, 5 weeks out. Mike Elias doesn't want to couch it just yet.
Yeah. And that goes into, basically you don't want to rush him, and they want the situation to be where you have a controlled environment. He's going to pitch a lot on the backfields against, his own teammates, just because you can control the environment. If you feel like, something doesn't look right, you can pull him immediately. You can get him in, look at him. If you gets the 20 pitches, you can pull him in the middle of an at-bat, and you can, it's more seamless on the backfields compared to a Grapefruit League game. So that's why they're probably going to do that. But you should see him later in spring. If everything goes correctly, you should see him in some spring training action. And then potentially on the opening day roster. If not, then very soon, early in the season. So I wouldn't worry too much about his prognosis.
Yeah, and considering the arms that they added to the bullpen in the offseason and going back to last season, you feel good about this bullpen's ability to hang on without him. I mean, they added Andrew Kittredge. We saw him throwing today. They have Sir Anthony Dominguez coming back, midseason acquisition from last year, Gregory Soto. Keegan Aiken was great last year, Cianel Perez. There are a lot of guys in this bullpen that they feel like can contribute.
Correct. I think, jumping on to the next injury update.
Trevor Rogers. Less good news for him. He had a dislocated kneecap late January during a training activity. He said it dislocated for only about a second, but any sort of dislocation is not a good thing. Good old subluxation.
Subluxation, yes.
You ever have a subluxation, Andy?
I have dislocated my shoulder before, and then I popped back in when I landed.
Gotcha.
So it all worked out.
You know it's painful.
I do know it's painful, yes. I'm a tough cookie, though. I don't know what we were talking about. Trevor Rogers. He is a number of weeks behind, Mike Elias said. So without knowing an exact timetable, in fact, Mike Elias said it's to be determined exactly when Trevor Rogers will start really ramping up again. Trevor said he's been doing some throwing, just not really, the movement isn't there because of the knee. So that is the issue. And obviously when you're pitching, he can throw off flat ground, but when you're pitching, you need your knees to, as a drive foot. I forget which foot it is.
Thinks it's his right knee.
It's his right knee. So that'd be his plant leg too, as a lefty. So that's a very difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Immediately, you don't want to be planting with a knee that's a little hurt.
Yeah, and we weren't expecting Trevor Rogers to be in this opening day rotation if everybody stayed healthy. But certainly a guy that the Orioles were hoping was going to take another step forward this year. First offseason with the Orioles after they traded for him from the Marlins last trade deadline. So they were hoping maybe he could get his velocity back up. If he's got a knee injury, that slows everything down. That sets him back.
Especially because I talked to Trevor earlier in the offseason, I think it was December, and he was very optimistic about the velocity strides he has shown. He's up to 93. Yeah, he was very optimistic about the fact that he was injury-free at the time. His delivery, he had revamped a couple things and really enjoyed how things were looking, how things were moving. We'll see exactly how long it takes for him to get back to that, if he can get back to that without pain.
And a couple other pitchers who we do expect to be in this opening day rotation were not here, but probably not long-term issues. Tomoyuki Sugano, still getting his visa sorted out, is expected to be back in Florida for the first time with the Orioles sometime this weekend. And Zach Eflin, positive news, had a baby. So he is not here.
He did not have a baby. His wife had the baby.
Well, they together have a new child in their family, and that is exciting for the Eflins. So good news
good
there.
For them.
Yeah.
It's their fourth child.
That's awesome.
Busy house.
Yeah, busy house indeed.
And last injury update that we have is Jorge Mateo. Things are going well in his recovery from Tommy John elbow reconstruction surgery. Is a less likely candidate to make the opening day roster. Of course, we talked to Mateo in the clubhouse and via team translator Brennan Q. Quinones. He said that his goal is still to be ready for the opening day roster, but that is a player tends to say that sort of thing. Mike Elias was a little bit more cautious with the timeline. At this exact moment, Mateo is only swinging one-handed as his elbow continues to recover. So seems to be an outside chance that he makes the opening day roster, but all things good in terms of his recovery timeline to this point.
Yeah, and he had that surgery last August, so it would be a very quick turnaround if he were here in camp being 100%. The Orioles obviously have Jackson Holliday that is expected to make the opening day roster. They could go with 5 outfielders after all the outfielders that they've signed, bring in Dylan Carlson, Ramon Laureano, and Tyler O'Neill, of course, who we saw today, who is absolutely jacked.
He shook my hand, and I felt it felt like it got hit in the funny bone. It reverberated up my arm. No, I'm kidding. It did not actually do that, but it was very impressive to see him in person. What other was impressive to see in person? Jackson Holliday. Tell me about that.
He is quite large. It feels like, look, he has grown up in front of our eyes. He was
truly, yes.
Really just a young kid when he was first drafted, and now he is expected to be a key piece of this team. And he looked bulked up. And that's the time for these guys to be bulked up, because you do that during the offseason. And over the course of the season, 6 months, you lose a lot of your muscle mass. You lose a lot of weight over the course of the season. So he's hoping to add some more power, I think, to his game because of that. A lot of guys looked bigger, looked stronger, and Jackson Holliday certainly was at the top of the list.
He definitely, I think, was at the on the top of the list. Stay tuned to the Baltimore Banner, because I will have a story on his offseason quick turnaround. Not a full-fledged huge feature or anything, but it does delve into his weight training. It includes a lot of ground beef and workouts with his dad. Earlier in the offseason, he basically just threw a bunch of heavy stuff around, was how he described it, like a bodybuilder. And he is now 200 pounds. He finished the season at 188 pounds. So he feels like he's in the best shape of his life, which is
classic.
always a classic. He didn't actually say that quote, but I did. He does feel good, though.
Yeah, it's a spring training mantra, all these guys showing up. In terms of this roster, where they stand right now, we still have a ways to go before opening day, but Andy, it feels like at this point last year, we were talking about Corbin Burnes and how this rotation felt good to go. And, until those injuries beset their rotation, it felt like a team that was ready to capitalize off their 100-win season from before. They were ready to try to take the AL East for the second straight year. This year's team, they lose a couple guys. Obviously, they lose Corbin Burnes in free agency. They lose Anthony Santander. They certainly spent a whole lot more this offseason than they had in previous years, one of the top 10 teams in terms of spending. But it does still feel like this team is still unfinished. We've been waiting for them to kind of make the move to get an ace that they did last year, that they did last February 1st in getting Corbin Burnes. They've made additions to the lineup. They've made additions to the bullpen. If there is one piece that is still missing, it is the ace. And Mike Elias, when asked about whether this roster is finished and whether he thinks this team needs an ace,
yes.
He did say not necessarily. You can have other strengths on your roster, and just because you don't have a pitcher of Corbin Burnes' caliber, you can still have a very good, very competitive team.
I completely agree with him. Most teams that are in big markets have an ace. Detroit Tigers had an ace in Skubal. Not a big market, but a team that did really well in the season and postseason. But you can do it if you have a really strong bullpen and enough depth, and you're creative enough with how to match up certain guys in spots. Mike Elias believes that the depth that this starting rotation has with, Eflin picked up at last year's trade deadline. You have Grayson and Dean Kramer. In fact, Hyde says he has high, expectations and hopes for what Dean Kramer and Grayson Rodriguez will do this year.
Yeah.
Which, you have to imagine that these guys are going to at least not regress, but should improve, especially with Rodriguez, should improve because he's a young guy and is continually going to be getting better to a certain point, obviously. But and Sugano, which is a little bit of a wild card, has never pitched in the MLB before or in America, so it's going to be a learning curve. But we'll see what he looks like when he arrives. And Charlie Morton, you know what you're getting in Charlie Morton. So, and then you add in Trevor Rogers is behind schedule, but you have Chase McDermott, Cade Povich, who am I missing? Brennan Young. You have a lot of options for this rotation, and they're happy that they have 8 or 9 starting rotation candidates entering spring training. That's where Hyde and Elias said they wanted to be, and here they are. Of course, it seemed like Baltimore was in a position to splash on a big-time free agent or a trade guy, just like they did with Burnes last year in a trade, was to get an ace. Having Burnes was a massive help. That was basically almost a guaranteed win every 5th day.
Yeah.
And he never missed a start and was a 2.92 ERA and 194 in a third innings. I mean, that's amazing. That's just
nails in this playoff start.
Yeah, just as good as you're going to get. Is it going to be, do you have a guy that fills in for that? Probably not on this roster yet. Maybe Grayson becomes that, and we'll see. But I think you believe in the whole is what Elias is believing. You believe in the idea that you have a really good bullpen behind them, and you have an offense that can put up runs. I mean, last year was a really good offense, a second half slump with some injuries, but they still, first half was a phenomenal offense. And, it didn't show up in the postseason, but at some point you would figure it's going to click at the right time. So I'm curious to think, to see what your thoughts on it are. Mike Elias did say, I kind of asked, is the offseason over? He said, we're still on the phone, working the phone, seeing if there's anything out there. But felt that it was the longer it goes in spring training, we're day one of pitchers and catchers being here, or working out rather. The longer it goes, the less likely it is for a move. So it seems like the window for such a move is dwindling. But I'm curious as to your opinion on, have I drank the Kool-Aid? Am I thinking that things are going to be fine without an ace? Well, should I be concerned?
I mean, I think whether to buy what Mike Elias is saying is another question, because the Dylan Cease trade from the White Sox to the Padres happened in the middle of March last year. So the Padres could be trading Dylan Cease at this time now. So stuff can still happen over the coming weeks, and maybe Mike Elias was just trying not to get people's hopes up by saying, starting to get closer to the season, who knows? So that move could still come. I do think the Orioles have definitely done a great job improving their depth. And that's something that, Elias fell short of saying that it was influenced by all the injuries that they had last season. He said any team is going to go through any amount of injuries. Last year we got it maybe a little bit more than usual, but we have to be prepared to weather injuries. I mean, all the outfielders that they just signed, Tyler O'Neill, Ramon Laureano, Dylan Carlson. They know that depth is going to be important. And for that starting rotation, look at the number of starters that they missed last year. Signing Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano. Those guys hopefully will add some depth so that this team can weather any kind of storm if any amount of injuries befall them. But I think that there's a legitimate reason that Mike Elias went out and traded DL Hall and Joey Ortiz and a top draft pick to get Corbin Burnes. I mean, last year he was talking about the benefits that an ace can have on a staff. He was talking about having a guy that can go out there and you believe he's going to take the ball and give you 7 or 8 strong innings and he's going to deliver you a win. You have a guy that can start game 1 of a playoff series. Right now, you don't necessarily have that. Grayson Rodriguez could be that guy at some point over the course of the season, but Mike Elias having 2 totally different mantras in 2 different off seasons, going from saying, boy, does it feel good to have an ace, to this year saying, well, we don't really need an ace. I mean, we're talking to pitchers like Grayson Rodriguez today, and he was talking about what this staff learned from Corbin Burnes in just 1 year. He said, we're going to go out there, we're going to try to attack the strike zone like Corbin did. We're not going to hunt strikeouts per se. We're going to deliver maybe more soft contact so we can pitch deeper into games. The Orioles may not doom them that they don't have that guy, but I still think they should be on the lookout for that guy over the next 6 weeks, over the first 3 months of the regular season and up until the trade deadline, because an ace is so critical for a team that is hoping to get in the playoffs and for a team that wants to go far.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think Mike Elias knows it. I mean, I think that right now he can't go out there and say, boy, do we really need an ace.
Yeah.
Boy, do we, or that is our one gaping hole in the roster. Because right now, they don't have one. And I think that he wants to empower his guys, make Grayson Rodriguez believe that he can be an ace, make Zach Eflin believe that he can be an ace. But at the same time, he's got to be looking at this team thinking, we still need somebody of Corbin Burnes' caliber. There aren't that many guys out there in the league like that.
So I will twist it around a little bit. And why I'm less concerned at this very moment. I think this team gets into the playoffs. They can win 90 games. I think there's more concern when it comes to, once you get to the playoffs. That's we saw it with Burnes, how great of a start it was. Like, that's a game changer. And obviously it didn't work because of, the batters did not perform up to what they have performed for a lot of their lives, honestly. But, they didn't perform like they did in the first half of the season. But I don't know if at this point he needs to feel the pressure to make a trade that he doesn't think is fair per se, because you do have, with this staff you have right now, if everyone stays healthy, you feel like you're going to be well positioned at the trade deadline. And if this team is in need of an ace at the trade deadline, you go and get one.
Yeah.
So I think there's less concern for me, because I feel like, okay, you're in a good spot. Go win some ball games. If you need to supplement the rotation more, or even the lineup if there's injuries, that's what the trade deadline is for. You make a deal in July. So that's what I think is maybe the way to spin it, so that it's not all doomsday in Baltimore. I don't think it was a failed offseason by any means.
No, absolutely not.
And I know that's not what you're saying either. I've just seen it online. I don't think it was a failure or anything like that. They added depth. They added players they really needed, like Andrew Kittredge. They really needed another late inning, guy that could handle high leverage situations, even with Félix Bautista coming back.
Yeah.
So I think they accomplished a lot of what they wanted, and here they are entering spring, saying, we pretty much checked off everything that we need. There's that one, bubble up there that it would be cool if you checked it off, but I don't think it's necessarily required at this moment.
Yeah.
An ace.
Yeah, and they basically totally remade their bullpen at the last year's deadline. I mean, Craig Kimbrell at that point we were starting to see some signs of him falling off. He had really an all-star first half, but at that point they probably needed a few guys to add to that bullpen. They went out and did it. They got Gregory Soto, they got Sir Anthony Dominguez, and they had a much better unit in the second half. You can go back to Michael Elias' Astros days, trading for Justin Verlander. That was a deadline deal, I believe, and that changed the course of their season and ended up propelling them through the playoffs. So I agree. I don't think Elias ever wants to feel like his back is against the wall, and he certainly doesn't feel like that now, as evidenced by the fact that he hasn't gone out and traded a bunch of guys for Dylan Cease, but it could still happen.
And he certainly doesn't want any GMs listening to what he just told us thinking, I'm going to ask for Jordan Westburg.
Right.
Because that would just be like, okay, well then if he goes out and says, we desperately need an ace,
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
it doesn't help him.
It doesn't help the guys in the clubhouse. It doesn't help his in trade negotiation. And it, might be true, but I don't think it's actually that true that there is a desperate need for an ace at this exact moment.
Right.
Maybe, if Grayson doesn't develop as he's expected to, or maybe there's a lot of injuries, you're going to feel like at the trade deadline there is that need. But
yeah,
it's a long-winded way of saying we could debate it all day.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up earlier the offense, because that was a huge storyline. Second half, they only score 1 run in 2 playoff games. This offense is largely the same. It's largely the same lineup from last year to this year. You add Tyler O'Neill, you add Gary Sanchez, but other than that, you're bringing back a lot of the guys. And I think a dominant storyline this season, and the first 6 months of the first 3 months of the season for sure, will be, okay, what kind of improvements are guys like Colton Cowser, Adley Rutschman? Hard to say Gunnar Henderson can get much better than he has been.
Stay the same.
You insert a healthy Jordan Westburg, a healthy Ryan Mountcastle,
a healthy Heston Kjerstad.
Healthy Heston Kjerstad. What kind of improvements could they make internally? Speaking of Heston Kjerstad, Mike Elias, Brandon Hyde had some good things to say about what they think he can do in 2025.
They had very good things to say. In fact, when Mike Elias was asked pretty pointedly about Heston Kjerstad and where he fits in this puzzle, because they have so many outfielders, they have 6 on the 40-man roster in camp that are, could all technically make the opening day roster. Mike Elias said, I believe his words was, he has earned the right, was his direct quote, of, getting at-bats in the major leagues. Definitely during spring, but also in the major leagues. And as Mike Elias said, Heston Kjerstad has hit the cover off the ball for most of his minor league life. And even when he's been in the majors, you have to acknowledge that he had concussion aftermath symptoms for a week before, maybe he should have gone back on the IL. So he was kind of playing through it. And I think he had strikeouts and whiffs that were elevated a little bit because of it, but he was a 250 hitter in 2 small stints. I honestly think he could be better than 250. I think his OPS could be higher than his 750 right now for career, but it's, again, 2 short stints in the majors. I think he can outperform both of those baseline numbers and really be a strong player. It may be a platoon role against righties, but even if it's only platoon, I mean, it's going to be more playing time than he saw in previous years. I think he will do. He will, number one, get that opportunity, I believe, based on the comments today, and he should do pretty well with it based on what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be his 3rd season where he's going to get big league action. Obviously, got his feet wet at the end of 2023, 2024. I think everybody was hoping they were going to get more from him, and suffers that concussion, unfortunately. The signing of Tyler O'Neill definitely impacts his playing time, but like you said, the Orioles love their matchups. They love their lefty-righty splits, and having a righty in O'Neill and a lefty in Heston Kjerstad, the fact that Kjerstad can DH, I think they feel like he is going to play a lot of games. If he stays healthy, I mean, I think it's certainly reasonable to expect he could play 100 games this year.
Yeah, and one interesting thing. So Brandon Hyde did not want to put specific playing time expectations on anything, but he did hint that he sees there are 5 outfielders that need at-bats, which is interesting because they have 6 guys that could potentially be on the 40-man. I imagine when he says 5, he said 3 lefties and 2 righties. So if I'm just going off the top of my head, Ramon Laureano and Tyler O'Neill, the 2 righties. The 3 lefties would be Colton Cowser, Cedric Mullins, and Heston Kjerstad.
Yep.
And then Dylan Carlson, who has minor league options, would probably get optioned and be honestly pretty good minor league depth if there is an injury. I mean, you understand that the floor is where it is, but you can at least trust him to do a job if you need him to.
Yeah.
That seems to hint at almost to begin the year they envisioned 5 outfielders on this team.
I would imagine. I think when they signed Ramon Laureano, that's kind of what I was thinking, especially with the Jorge Mateo injury. I think when Mateo is ready to come back, hopefully early in the season, I think that changes the equation. But 5 outfielders, certainly, that's what they went into the playoffs with last year.
Yeah.
Remember, Austin Slater ended up hanging on up until the very end. In theory, Dylan Carlson should be an upgrade over Austin Slater. He is a lot younger.
In theory,
It's going to be hopefully a very deep team, and I think that that's what they're expecting. Is that this team is going to be perhaps even deeper than they were last year.
In fact, I think it was Jacob Calvin-Meyer from the Baltimore Sun. Shout out Jacob. He asked Brandon Hyde, "Is this the deepest team you've had the pleasure of managing?" This is his 7th season as manager, which I realized today was 7 seasons. I don't know how many people, when Brandon Hyde was hired, would have guessed that he would have 7 seasons under his belt here. So pretty amazing, the longevity and the ability to survive the rebuild. I mean, that doesn't always happen for guys. But 7 seasons now. Brandon said, absolutely, this is the deepest roster. This is also the most experienced roster that he has. He pointed out a guy like Gunnar Henderson, who is 23 years old. This is his 3rd big league season, or could be, 3rd.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. You have a guy like Jackson Holliday who's 21, but he grew up around the game, and
it's going to be his 4th big league season, 3rd full one, right? Because he won.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
So for Gunnar, that is.
Yeah, for Gunnar.
So he has 3 under his belt already, and this is going to be his 4th. Yeah. So then you have Jackson, you have Colton Cowser. You have a lot of guys that are now, they were the young prospects. They were the inexperienced, and who knows how they're going to handle the playoffs. Now you feel pretty good about, hey, you have guys that understand what it's like to lose in the postseason, but they also understand what it takes to last over 162 games and get to the postseason and not be completely exhausted. So I think this is a maybe better prepared team for what it takes to win in October than they've ever been before. And obviously that has to be the case because they've been in October twice before and they haven't won. So if they're not better prepared now than they were, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
So thanks, Captain Obvious. But it's definitely, they've shown strides in some areas, and one of those areas is experience, and that I don't think you can discount that.
Yeah, I mean, adding Charlie Morton, who's a multiple-time World Series winner, I think that kind of veteran presence is something that they are going to be lacking when they lost Corbin Burns, when they lost Anthony Santander, and they're hoping to regain it between Tomoyuki Sugano. Weird that he's going to be a veteran, even though he's going to be a rookie. I'm fascinated to talk to him when he gets to camp. It's going to be a very, very interesting team. It's going to be an interesting spring training. We're off to a flying start here, Andy. Beautiful weather. You already got to pet some dogs already.
I did.
You got to see Thatch, who is the dog of the head groundskeeper here at Smith Stadium.
Yeah, and the breaking news is Thatch has a little brother now. Thatch is 3 years old, and his little brother is turning 3 very soon, and they're close friends. And I got to pet both of them, and it was maybe the greatest thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Nothing else will compare to petting dogs on day 1 of spring training.
And you can see videos of that at AF Kostka on
Twitter and Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Check out Blue Sky.
Check out Blue Sky. You are active on Blue Sky as
I am
well.
very active.
At All Banner Sports, we are on Twitter, and we have our Blue Sky account as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Paul Mancano, at Paul Mancano. And please write us a review. If you write us a 5-star review, I will read it out here on the Banner Baseball Show. Probably going to have another show here from Sarasota before I head back to snowy Baltimore. At some point, I'll probably get Danielle Allentuck on the show as well. And John Mioli, my usual co-host, will be back as well to share his thoughts as he's arriving in spring training in just a couple days. In the meantime, we're going to soak up the Rays and be sure to get more information on thebaltimorebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months to read all of Andy and Danielle, John, Kyle's, everybody's great coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Andy Kostka, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.